Welcome to the Blind Spot. Today, I'm talking about Thanksgiving. I know we had Thanksgiving recently, but I didn't want to wait a whole year to cover this topic. I'm going to be talking about it in a little different way than you normally hear Thanksgiving talked about. Normally we talk about, our gratitude, what we should be thankful for, and kind of celebrate not like this, our independence, but the beginnings of early settlers that led to the foundation of our country. But, and I'll just get right on into the idea. There is a hypocrisy that arises when we discuss historical land claims versus modern border sovereignty. And I saw a news article recently on Thanksgiving, and the commenters were condemning its celebration, arguing that it whitewashes the alleged theft of Native American lands by early settlers. This critique, though framed as a pursuit of historical justice, reveals a striking contradiction. We're going to examine this, the passionate condemnation of historical land theft on one hand, and on the other hand, the vocal support for policies that facilitate or even encourage illegal immigration and the bypassing of established U.S. borders in our present day. It's an inconsistency that requires a conservative focus. Now let's look at the first side of this perceived contradiction. Many on the progressive left argue that Thanksgiving is morally problematic. Their narrative centers on the idea that European settlers stole land from Native Americans, making the founding of America inherently unjust. They call for land back movements and a fundamental reevaluation of American history. From their perspective, the sovereignty of indigenous peoples over their ancestral lands is paramount, and historical boundaries must be respected and corrected even centuries later. Now let's pivot to the stance of many of these same critics today as U.S. policy is debated. These are often the same individuals and groups who advocate for open borders, who actively support policies that effectively decriminalize illegal entry into the United States, and who champion sanctuary cities. They argue against the enforcement of our immigration laws, viewing border security as inhumane. When it comes to the sovereignty of the modern U.S. nation-state, they often de-emphasize the concept of territorial integrity and the necessity of legal immigration processes, framing national borders as arbitrary constructs. And as a U.S. citizen, I feel like there's a glaring inconsistency here. If the historical claim to land by Native Americans holds such moral weight that it should fundamentally alter our view of Thanksgiving and demand restitution for centuries-old actions, why does the sovereignty of the United States over its currently held territory appear to hold so little weight for these same critics? Why is the protection of our present U.S. state borders against illegal entry decried as immoral when historical territorial claims are held up as sacred? This contradiction reveals a selective application of principles. For conservatives, the concept of national sovereignty is foundational. But let's step back and consider how any nation establishes itself. Look at a map or a globe. What is the single most defining feature of a nation state? It's the clear, sharp line of a border. All nations, from the smallest principality to the largest republic, form their territory through force, treaty, purchase, or conquest. The history of human civilization is, in large part, the history of peoples establishing, defending, and shifting those territorial boundaries. Territorial sovereignty, the right to control what happens within those fixed borders, is the oldest and most fundamental principle of international order. When critics condemn historical land theft, they are implicitly upholding this very principle of territorial sovereignty for Native American groups. They are arguing that these groups had a rightful claim to land and that this claim was violated. This concept is powerful, that a people have a right to their land, their culture, and their self-determination within their borders. However, when these same individuals advocate for open borders or impose the enforcement of U.S. immigration laws, they are effectively undermining the territorial sovereignty of the United States. They're arguing that the nation's current borders are less legitimate, less worthy of defense, or that the right of individuals to cross them illegally outweighs the nation's right to control entry. And this leads to a grave national security concern, the risk of takeover by accretion. Accretion means the gradual, cumulative growth of something, often without explicit notice. When a nation allows massive numbers of illegal immigrants to enter and establish a presence, it leads to a slow, steady erosion of sovereignty. This isn't a military invasion, it's a slow-motion takeover, where laws, institutions, and civic cohesion are gradually undermined from within. When a nation loses the ability to enforce its borders, determine its population, and ensure the rule of law within its own territory, it has by definition lost its sovereignty, not in a single violent act, but through a constant, unauthorized presence that fundamentally alters the nature of the state. Consider this. What would the current landscape of the United States look like had European settlers never arrived? It would not be an untouched, conflict-free paradise. It would likely have been a continued complex history of territorial wars, treaties, and conquest among various Native American tribes and nations, constantly redrawing the internal borders of the continent, just as history unfolded everywhere else in the world. The shift in sovereignty would have still occurred, driven by different groups and different historical forces. The idea that a sovereign territory is forever fixed and can never be claimed, lost, or gained by an external power is historically and practically naive. From a conservative viewpoint, the concept of property rights, whether of an individual or the nation, must be consistent. If Native Americans had property rights to their land historically, then the United States today also has a right to its territory and the ability to control who enters it. This principle should apply consistently. And now let's look at this profound irony through a Christian lens. For Christians, The call to consistency in our moral reasoning and our application of justice is paramount. God is a God of order, not contradiction. Our faith teaches us about both justice and compassion. Yes, we are called to compassion for the immigrant and the stranger. But this compassion is to be exercised within a framework of justice and the rule of law. The Bible also upholds the concept of established boundaries and the authority of governing leaders to maintain order. Romans 13, 1-7 is a biblical reference to this. These are not mutually exclusive principles. Furthermore, while modern history condemns territorial conquest, the Bible presents a more complex view of nationhood and land claims. As terrible as war and the ensuing territorial shifts can be, the Bible clearly tells us that God often instructed the Israelites to go to war to claim the territory He wanted them to possess. In the Old Testament, the establishment of the nation of Israel was inseparable from divinely ordained conquest to claim the Promised Land. This biblical reality affirms that territory is a necessary component of national identity, and the process of establishing and defending borders is a constant, if difficult, reality of life under the sun. When we advocate for historical justice regarding past land claims, we are implicitly recognizing the legitimacy of boundaries and property. If we then turn around and argue for the disregard of present-day U.S. borders and immigration law and allow for the takeover by accretion, we are failing to apply principles consistently. A truly Christian approach seeks to apply God's principles of justice, order, and compassion consistently, regardless of the historical period or the political convenience. It means upholding the rule of law while seeking to reform unjust laws through legitimate processes. It means understanding that while individuals deserve compassion, the United States also has a right to secure its borders for the good of its citizens and the maintenance of its national sovereignty. The blind spot here is allowing emotional appeals or political narratives to override principled, consistent reasoning rooted in God's unchanging character. Thank you for joining me today on The Blind Spot. Let us seek true consistency in the pursuit of justice and the defense of our nation's sovereignty. Do you agree or disagree with my opinions? If you want to support more content like this, please engage with the video on the platform on which you are viewing or hearing this. Subscribe, like, follow, comment, share, all that stuff. If you want to support this content further and more directly, please consider joining my Patreon community. There are 3 tier levels of support, and 2 of those will allow you to unlock unblurred versions of all videos and more bonus content, including the Blind Spot Book Club that will launch in January. Check out patreon.com/theblindspottpodcast to view all of the tiers and benefits and choose your focus level. Find the link in the description. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, which will take a look at the history of one of the songs that shaped the United States.